Hey there, I'm Lee Ullman here with some big news from the National Young Farmers Coalition. We're partnering with Heritage Radio Network on a special season of The Farm Report. It's all about what's happening with the Farm Bill and how it impacts farmers and eaters.
I am growing diversified vegetables on land that's been in our family for 150 years.
And so with the pandemic, gentrification, property values going up, we had to sell the land and we lost it.
Join us as we uncover the untold stories behind this massive piece of legislation that shapes how we grow our food, what we eat, and so much more.
The problems we have had, those are things that come from earlier Farm Bill and USDA policy, right? Like Earl Butts, get big or get out.
You know, it's my responsibility to know not only what I'm eating, but then like how that all came to be. And realize like, wow, like this piece of legislation, all this money, like it's technically something that I support as a taxpayer.
While Congress debates the next Farm Bill, this is not just an invitation to listen. It's a call to action. Be part of the conversation. Subscribe to the Farm Report on Heritage Radio Network, wherever you listen to podcasts.
Today's program was brought to you by Le Creuset, made in France since 1925. The first and finest enameled cast iron cookware, a favorite for generations. For more information, visit lecreuset.com. That's LECREUSET.com.
I'm HRN's Executive Director, Katie Mosman-Wadler, with a preview of the next episode of Meat and Three, our weekly food news roundup. The topic? Restaurants and rules. Some rules are based on religion.
This makes for an unusual scene in a Manhattan restaurant. A shy 20-year-old dictating the kitchen standards to a humble veteran chef.
While other rules promote health and safety.
But who are these feared rule keepers with the power to shut a restaurant down?
They're not really like food lovers.
Some restaurant rules fall outside the domain of the kitchen.
All civil rights issues have basically, at one point or another, revolved around the bathroom.
For more, tune in to this week's Meat and Three on Heritage Radio Network, available wherever you listen to podcasts.
Hello, and welcome to A Hungry Society. I'm Portia Wilson, and this is the show where we talk about food, food media, and so much more. Today's guests are Michelle and Suzanne Rosseau, Jamaican-born sisters, chefs, and authors. They established their culinary reputation with the debut of Ciao Bella in 1996, a groundbreaking restaurant in Kingston that created a paradigm shift with its artful use of Jamaican ingredients and classic cooking techniques. The success of that restaurant led to the women being called on to create premium culinary events, including several state dinners and an official dinner for His Royal Highness, the Prince of Wales. Their expertise has since evolved into creating food and beverage concepts for global clients. At home, Michelle and Suzanne use their culinary knowledge and effervescent personalities to inspire appreciation for Jamaican traditions with their hugely popular food and travel show, Two Sisters in a Meal. They also produced and starred in the web series Island Potluck, a joint production with the Jamaica Tourism Board. Their first cookbook, Caribbean Potluck, received critical acclaim and was named among NPR's best books of 2014. And this year, they have released Provisions, I don't know if I call it a follow-up to that cookbook, but it is a new cookbook that they've released, and it is absolutely gorgeous. Suzanne and Michelle, welcome to the show.
Thank you. So happy to be here.
Yes,
Thank you
feel
for
like
having us.
This has been in the works for a minute now.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
true. And we've had calls between New Jersey and Jamaica talking about planning this. So I'm so happy to have you both here.
We're really honored.
And we're very happy to be here.
So Provisions, I alluded to it in the intro, but I'm going to let both of you explain Provisions.
Who do you want to talk first? Okay, so this is Suzanne speaking. I think provisions for us was obviously our second effort at a cookbook. I think in the first cookbook, Caribbean Potluck, we began the exploration of our family line, particularly of our matriarchal female line, and discovered really, really interesting information about our great-grandmother, Martha Matilda Briggs, that really, I think, sensitized us to the stories of some of the women in our family that we had not been aware of and didn't know of, and maybe had never taken the time to really pay any note to. And I think for us, there was a twofold intention here. One was to explore the ingredients of the region. We say it's a very ingredient-focused book. And the other was to dig into that narrative some more about her and the impact that she would have had on the world with her culinary career, really, and how that sort of connected us to our own culinary career and our own life. And I'll let my sister Mish continue on from there.
And I think, after you mentioned Caribbean Potluck, and I think Caribbean Potluck, when we were doing our promotions, we found there was such a great level of interest by people from, everywhere, from in the UK, from here in Canada, about the ingredients themselves. And so even though that was not an ingredient-focused book, anytime we did appearances, they wanted to know what's ackee exactly and so we felt that it was important to tell a story that's centered around the ingredients, but we're both huge history buffs, and we love to research, and we love, linking the past to the present. Not as a way of going back to the past and glorifying it or glamorizing it, but more to inform your consciousness for how you evolve into the future, but retain a connection and a sense of authenticity with your heritage and your culture. And so in that kind of process, I would say, telling the stories of the women was important, telling the stories of the ingredients was important, but then kind of trying to connect the two. And I think that was really the work in the book, is to find how we could take these modern recipes that were ingredient driven and connect them back to us and our family and these women and, history of slavery and all of that kind of stuff. And so that's really to me the essence of what it's about.
Yeah, this cookbook, it feels kind of not wrong, but like not the full picture to call it just a cookbook, because it has so much history, like what you were saying, Michelle. And I want to read one of my favorite parts.
Sure.
That kind of really gets to the root of what Provisions is all about. Women had to use their ingenuity to feed themselves, their families, and their masters. And the culinary techniques and eating habits they developed form the root of what we know as the West Indian diet of today. Mm-hmm. This book is really a tribute to the women that, did so much of the work, fed everyone, and got no thanks or credit for it. Mm-hmm. And, their traditions that they established just through pure ingenuity are what we see in West Indian cooking today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very much so. I think, one of the things that sort of came home to us as we started looking at the work, and we started looking at it first as the ingredients and then the commonality of these ingredients throughout all of the islands that we had sort of traveled in the Caribbean. And then we started looking at sort of the history of slavery and, colonization and the impact that had on how the food evolved. I think the compelling story that then connected to our own personal narrative was of the cooks and the nurturers have always been the women. We come from this, wonderful matriarchal culture, and yet we had never really stopped to examine the cuisine from that perspective or that lens before. And here we were as women in the industry, in this world, doing the same thing somehow at a much obviously higher level than it was done before. And it was a kind of very beautiful and sort of patent and very compelling story that was obviously very personal at the same time. When we looked at the story about this woman who was our great-grandmother, that really we felt needed to be told. And I think, if when we thought of all of the most memorable moments of our lives and all of the most delicious moments of our lives, they were oftentimes in the company of family members, aunts, uncles, nannies, housekeepers, people we'd met on the roadside cooking, saltfish and yam, or that delicious pone that we picked up on the road when we were 10 driving to the country. And so it was, all of these wonderful women and different of every walk of life, really, of every kind of, from every level of society, who had made an impact on us through the flavors and the meals that they had shared with us. And so I think that sort of helped to connect all of the pieces of the story together. And it was very, I think, for us, an emotional journey, and a very personal one in many ways.
And that spirit of generosity is something that shines through, the women of the region in multiple ways. And I think that it's not recognized often enough. Like many other countries, Jamaica is not alone in this. Even though women are largely the cooks, they retain their positions in a more domesticated role or space. And when you look at the actual restaurants and the hotels and the executive chefs and the really higher paid levels and more developed levels of this career, this field that we are in, very few of them are held by women. And yet at the same time, the women and the female entrepreneurs, and that their entrepreneurship really came through food and preparing food, the things that they had at their fingertips, the things that they could use, the skill set that they actually had already honed, is really how they built businesses that have sustained and supported the family equally as much as the men. And so, in slavery, and especially post-emancipation, the women were the ones who went to market to sell. And I think that there's never been enough acknowledgement of that and the impact that would have had on the evolving and developing cuisine. And whether that is a society like Jamaica or whether that's a society like Trinidad, where you then had, a large Indian migration and Indian mothers were then influencing the food in a different way. I think that's how the cuisine evolves and changes in a continuous way. And I think that was something that we wanted to examine much deeper.
And I think to the point of the markets, at least certainly for our personal sort of narrative in the Jamaican context, I mean, the markets were the places where they could get dressed in their lit finery, that they could be sort of free to sort of socialize and carouse, but they could then, sell their wares, but they could meet with friends and gather. So it had so many, both, so many different sort of connotations, emotional and social ones, and the culture there that would have evolved from that. Opportunities to meet with, slaves at other plantations, or to trade and sell their wares, to become known for their cooking or their skill in making one particular thing, as well as the history. So it just began to just kind of,
and it was probably also probably a space where they spread news of rebellion.
Yeah.
Where rebellion sort of, had where they could communicate freely, because otherwise they would never really have had much spaces like that.
Right.
So it was important for us to tell this story
and
this way.
And at this time of year too, in Jamaica, we have something called Grand Market, which is like the big sort of, it would have been, I guess, the day they were allowed to, in the old plantation times, would have been a day where everybody was allowed to celebrate and be free, which were usually on Christmas Eve. And we still call it Grand Market, and people still go out on the road and still celebrate. But it's obviously a very different reality. So it was, this was the time of year that festivity was really allowed, and a day off was given, but also the opportunity to gather and commune. And so, there was so much to celebrate in that story, and there was much as there was loss and brutality and hurt and pain. There was so much beauty in that as well, which I think is what we wanted to bring forward in this book.
So one of those stories, and Michelle, I know you're the history buff.
Yes. Absolutely.
Which you dug deep into your family history for this book. Can we talk about your great grandmother a little more? I know you mentioned her briefly, but I think her story is so fascinating. So can you
Sure.
tell us about her?
So her name is Martha Matilda Briggs, and she is my father's grandmother, so my father's maternal grandmother. And she, we were growing up, we always heard vague references to her, I would say, nothing in great detail, that she was a woman who was strident and powerful and formidable, and she was one of the best bakers and the greatest patty makers in Jamaica. And yet, today there's no patty business. So I think what started for us as research into, what happened to the patty recipe, evolved into an awareness that she wasn't just a patty maker. She actually owned a restaurant in the late 1920s called the Royal Cafe. And then from that, which she purchased, it was on Barry Street. It was across from the offices of Myers and Fletcher, which was the number one law firm at the time, and all of the barristers and attorneys of the day used to dine at her establishment with regularity, including Norman Washington Manley. And there was, as I discovered that source, then I was able to search a bit more into tracing her story. And I think what we recognized, and Suzanne can jump in here, but what we recognized about her is that she really was one of these women who stood her ground, didn't give in to the norms of the day, which was that black women, let alone black women, did not own businesses or property. My father's brother tells us that she owned 3 houses on Retirement Road, that she lived in one and she ran her restaurant in the basement of the other. And just by looking through that and listening to people speak about her, we realized that, I found, 14 or 15 snippets about her in the Gleaner archives. Not only did she sue somebody for running over her foot and so not allowing her to make patties, she sued them for £100, which back then would have been a lot of money. But in that story is where I found how much she used to sell the patties for. I lost my income for X months at selling X patties a day, which I stood on my feet to make. And so, the articles and the stories about her really displayed her character, and I don't think anybody else could have revealed that to us in such an expressive way, because for whatever reason the stories in the family never centered around her. It was always around the men in the line. And then the other big story was that she was defended by Norman Manley in a court case where they had revoked her tavern license. So I think that part of the discovering who she was really, it kind of opened our eyes to the fact that she couldn't have been the only woman like this. As much as it was abnormal that this was her story, it was probably a pretty common story, except hers just happened to be documented. And I think that was an impetus for us to dig and delve a little deeper into other women like that and talk to other women who, we could get these kinds of stories from.
Yeah, I think about this often, but reading your book, it really reminded me kind of why I do the work that I do. It's because those stories should be documented, and not just in the sense of a court case or a product, but who are these women? Because I think there's plenty of women doing exceptional work today. And
absolutely,
we'll lose those stories when we lose them.
Sure.
They're not shared as much as male
and
stories
I think
are.
One of the things that we found, or that was fascinating, was once we took sort of this view of the work, or this sort of angle with the work, really looking at it from the female perspective and our own personal. Really, what was fascinating was that everybody you spoke to about food or cooking, particularly people that we knew well or we had interacted with in the islands, had stories of their grandmothers, their aunts, their memories of things that were cooked, things that had evolved over time and changed. I remember I called one lady who is a family friend, my Aunt Shirley, whose recipe is the guava jam, and when I said to her, so what would be different today in how you cooked when you were a child, and she said, well, during the war, which I didn't even think about this, there were rations. So when, we still at Christmas time make Christmas pudding, which is obviously a very British tradition that we've inherited and kept. And she says, my mother used to take figs, which in Jamaica are little small bananas. And because we couldn't get the dried fruit, and because sugar was hard to come by because it was wartime and there were rations on the ships, they would dry figs out in the sun to make a kind of dried fruit that could be soaked in wine and rum for the month to make a Christmas pudding, so that out of this inventiveness and invention and this sort of taking ingredients and manipulating them to work in other ways would be the Christmas pudding. And then the fascinating thing was that she told me this, and she would be my father's contemporary. My father is 80, actually, coming up next week. And she's known my dad since she was a child, so this would have been her mother. I then was talking to another sort of elder, another woman who is probably Mrs. Trench's mom, Mrs. Donaldson, who we have 2 recipes from there, the mango chutney and the marmalade. And she was sort of very not well that day and sort of poorly, so I was recording her. And when I started to ask her about her mother and her grandmother. What was so fascinating was that they did the same thing. Yet I had never ever talked sort of what were the traditions and sort of how did you learn this mango chutney or how did you learn to make this marmalade. So like her marmalade recipe was like a third generation. So her daughter was a fourth generation of women. So she learned that recipe from her mother, her grandmother was this baker. So I found I did a lot of that part.
The rind.
And they don't they actually put the pulp on the rind because that helps create the pectin. And so it's a pectin-less marmalade. Wow. But what was fascinating was to just, speak to all of these women who maybe no one had ever stopped to sort of talk to about these things before, tell you all of these memories of what they ate, how they consumed them, and what were the traditions and habits that were then alive, what has been lost, what has been retained. Because for the most part, they're very much oral. And as a result, you tend to lose them.
And if you don't speak to people and get the stories, then the stories disappear, and I think that was what we felt a sort of a sadness about, that we never took the time to speak to our grandmother, who would have been able to tell us all about her mother.
Yes,
and really get forget the recipe. It's not about the recipe. It's really more about this story of how they lived, how they survived. And that was common across. I was in St. Kitts working on a project, and I was interviewing a young gentleman who was telling me about his mother. And his story was that they're over in St. Kitts during the war. Ships weren't crossing, and they started to use more things like breadfruit flour and cooking with cassava flour because they couldn't get imported ingredients anymore, which were common before, So I think that's a narrative. And then there's that great story Mrs. Donaldson told you about the gifts at Christmas.
Yeah.
Which is
Mrs. Donaldson or Gwen, she was a big entertainer. So she would cook and like they have these 100-person, cocktail and dinner parties, but do all of her own cooking. And they would make this candy that is it's like a citron, candied they call peel. It. It's like a candied peel where they would candy like this peel of I guess citrus fruit, which apparently it was very, very British thing to do, and I think it's still sold in sort of well-known stores at emporiums in the UK. That they would gift when people came or, when they were going to other people's homes. And then I was like, but I've never even tasted that. So it was also an interesting exploration in how food has evolved and how, how habits change and how things that were once in style come out of style
and come back into
style and traditions are lost. And, that was really, I think, the joyful sort of pleasurable part of this exploration. And in fact, one of the women, Mamacita, who is a friend's grandmother, who we have the arepa recipe inspired by, who we met during high school, and every time she would come from Venezuela, they would have this huge arepas feast, and we would be like, they'd say, "Come over, Mamacita is here," and we would. Usually it was Christmas time or January, and we'd go and eat to our heart's content. Actually, she passed away a few months ago, so in some way, I think for us, it's that it felt important to tell the stories while they were still here, to have them, even if it's it's a cookbook, it's the best we could do, but it was still important. So I think for them, in particular, the wars and that family, Mamacita's family, they were, I think, they didn't know we had taken the recipe and done it, so they were very happy when they saw it.
Wow, that's so beautiful, and just speaks to the why retaining these stories is so important.
Yeah,
absolutely.
The recipes in here are so contemporary. And I'm going to read another little part that I found so fascinating when I was reading this. Despite our pleasure at discovering the unknown recipes of our heritage, we did not wish to focus on recreating dishes of the past. We love the traditional recipes of our grandparents, but there needs to be a new presentation of our food that is both accessible to all and relevant to modern life. This cookbook draws on inspiration from our culinary heritage, but offers a new spin on the typical ingredients so often featured in old-time West Indian cooking. How did you come to that sort of decision?
I think that was very deliberate. I think in many ways, Suzanne and I have a very particular style of eating, and we've lived and traveled around a lot, and we've lived in many different places, and I've lived in Europe, and I've lived in New York, and we've lived in Canada, and we were in Trinidad, we were in Jamaica, and so how we eat and how we like to eat is very much health focused, ingredient focused, and very similar to how the recipes in the book are. And so what I really felt when I was kind of trying to really structure the book, in terms of just how the chapter flow would be. We knew what the recipes would be straight off the bat. We knew the kind of recipes we wanted. And that was because, one, we couldn't find books that had these kinds of recipes. Two, we wanted to present the ingredients in different ways that were not being utilized to the maximum range of capacity of the ingredients themselves. So, because in Jamaica we boil green banana, everyone just eats boiled green banana. But when we went to Dominica, they had curried green banana. And when we were here, they eat it this way. And when we were there,
Pickled.
So we just started to say, we have to bring it together, but with our sort of flavor profile and how we like to eat and the type of food we like to serve in our businesses and restaurants, and present it that way. And I think, more and more what you see happening throughout the Caribbean and throughout the West Indies, and I'm sure it's the same in any country like Latin America or Africa or India, you have generations of children leaving their homes to come and study in other parts of the world, whether that is Europe or whether that's America or whether that's Canada. And then they either stay or they return home. But when you return home, your consciousness about your food has evolved, because you can't eat grandma's stew at university in the dorm. That's not available. That's something you would go home on the weekends to get. And so the way the culture of the world has evolved is that, people are dining out. Food needs to be more accessible. It needs to be quicker. There's a lot more one-pot cooking, single meals.
Healthier.
I live alone, healthier. So I need to be able to come home and bam, 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 and I have dinner on the table. I'm not cooking for kids or family or husbands. And so we really wanted food that would be relevant. When we say relevant, that's what we mean. Relevant to second and third generation West Indian people who, even if they do live at home, don't want to eat the way that, mom and dad and grandma and grandpa ate, which was very different, a lot more hearty stews and larger portions of starch. And, nowadays people want more vegetables, more protein, cleaner foods, healthy fats, gluten-free, all of those things are not only are they trending, but it was actually what the traditional diet was. Very, very close to that,
Right.
So simple flame roasted starches, flame roasted proteins, and salted and cured proteins. So you see speck on menus and prosciutto, and that's a salted and cured protein. You know what I mean? And so you're seeing all the pickled herring, traditional pickled herring in Jamaica, which it's not in the book because the book is vegetarian, but those types of dishes are very much trending again, and they never went out of style in Jamaica. So
Right.
How do you prepare it in a way that someone of today will eat it? And
I also think it was, how do we make the food that has not been received outside of the region accessible to everybody and not make it just Caribbean food? So I think it was a twofold. I think we were twofold in the intention. One was sort of from our own food consciousness of having a more sophisticated approach to food, having traveled and eaten widely. How do we take and look at the ingredients in the region as we would prepare it and how we want to eat it? And how do we present the food in a way that the modern sort of, gourmet or Epicurean or foodie, for lack of a better word, can also have access to the cuisine of our region without feeling that it is something that is foreign or too out there or too hard to prepare, because that's the only way I think that we can translate and take it outside of our region, because I think that's where for a big part of the challenge of the region's cuisine has been the lack of accessibility and translatability outside of the region itself. And I think that in part was another thing that we wanted to do, to really present it with fresh eyes, with a modern approach, in the language that every cook who cooks out everywhere part of the world would appreciate and see. Because I think one of the challenges of Caribbean cuisine as a whole is that, certainly Jamaican cuisine, I would say, is that it is still very much presented in the ways it has been for decades and decades and decades.
Right.
And people still eat it that way and are very stuck
And very-
to
and
their
very loyal
traditions and very
to-
loyal. So they are reticent to change, but also reticent to explore. So it was a sort of multiple layered reasons why we felt it needed to have that
And
new sort of language and new face, really, a new presentation, because at the same time we wanted to present the food in refined and beautiful and elegant settings.
yeah.
So, go ahead.
No, and that's why we made an effort to make it clear that it's not traditional, it's modern, so that people don't say, but this is not Caribbean food, and then dismiss the work without really getting an opportunity to try and see what it really is like.
So a couple things. One, I totally agree about, West Indian food being viewed one way. And, even as a writer, like when I write about Caribbean chefs, like there is this expectation that, you know, I'm going to talk about jerk and rice and beans and like there's so much more.
Yeah, it's extremely limiting and very narrow.
Right.
Yeah.
And then also, it took me like getting into the book a bit and I was like, wait a minute, this is all vegetarian. I'm even hesitant to say that because I feel like when we say vegetarian cookbooks in America, like there's like this certain
box.
Exactly.
Yes,
there's this like narrow box that comes around it, and this doesn't fit into that box.
I mean, if we were to compare the work, I mean, you know, not we can compare it to his work, but we were that book that Ottolenghi did, Plenty, you know, where it was about the vegetables, and it happened to be. It may not have been a vegetarian cookbook because I'm sure there was meat in it, but the book was about the vegetables. That's what this work was for us. It was about the vegetables and the ingredients themselves. And if it so happened that the book is vegetarian, then okay, fine. But it doesn't mean if you're a non-vegetarian that you shouldn't buy it, because you can certainly add bacon to that salad or you know, grilled meat on the side of this dish, or you know what I mean. So it's really, it either gives you a wholesome range of ingredients for a vegetarian or even a vegan, because there are things that can be changed, and it gives a meat eater a lot of really great sides and salads and you know cocktail snacks, and you know it's very diverse that way, and we try to make it very diverse that way. And so much of the trade historically in the Caribbean was built around the trade of food, sugar and cocoa and coffee and pineapple and rum and bananas, and you know, even Christopher Columbus was in search of spices when he landed on the West Indies, you know. So I think so much of our industry and our economy and our heritage and our culture is built around these ingredients, that to do a book focused on history in any way and that does not acknowledge that would be remiss of us, because I think they weren't talking about oxtail or goat or you know, jerk then. What they were talking about was these things. Right. And so that was really a big part also of why we felt the need.
Yeah. And I think also it's very much our own style of cooking. Like, I mean, I think the book is a representation of the way that we eat and the way that we like to eat and the ingredients we eat in the way that we do them.
And how our tables look.
So it would, outside of all the other reasons, it really is our food personality that speaks through in this work, because this is the way that we like to eat, whether we're eating in Jamaica or any part of the world. And oftentimes in our business and in our years of both catering and restaurants, a lot of these types of dishes will appear as sides and accompaniment to rack of lamb and grilled pork and, you know, chicken with salsa verde and a host of other wonderful meat products. So, I mean, I think a big part of our style of cooking and our style of creating menus has always been to have wonderful accompaniments of multiple different kinds of dishes that are alongside meat or protein dishes. So I think this is very authentic to us as well, in terms of just how we go around and how we look at our own ingredients and the ingredients that we have grown up with, and how we have, in the course of the years that we have cooked and catered and run restaurants, how we have started to treat them and use them and sort of serve them to others. And so it really does show, you know, very much our personal aesthetic towards the cuisine and towards this food in general.
And the table.
Yeah.
These are all definitely.
Yeah, the pictures are absolutely gorgeous. Like it feels like you're sitting at someone's
table. Suzanne did a lot of that propping when she scoured aunts' tables and houses to get all of the china and the tablecloths and all of those lovely things. Wow. So
yeah, it's absolutely beautiful. So we're gonna take a quick break. We'll be right back with more.
Yay,
Thank you.
Hey, I'm Jimmy Carboni, the host of Beer Sessions Radio on the Heritage Radio Network. I was introduced to Le Creuset cast iron skillets many years ago in my first restaurant, Mugsy's Chow Chow in the East Village. Le Creuset has the superior heat retention of cast iron paired with unparalleled performance and the ease of enamel. That means delicious food with easy cleanup. And I love easy cleanup after running my own restaurants in New York for 23 years. Le Creuset original heirloom cookware is backed by a lifetime warranty. Their bold colors and timeless designs allow for an expression of personal style in the kitchen and beyond. Head to lecreuset.com/HRN. That's LECREUSET.com to see all the new products and amazing holiday gift deals. HRN listeners will get 20% off the new Le Creuset cookbook with the code HRN.
All right, so we are back with Suzanne and Michelle Rosseau, sisters, authors, chefs, restaurant owners, globetrotters. I could keep going on though. Okay, so now I want to hear about. I know you spent some time in Trinidad growing up too, but what was dining like in Jamaica when you were growing up?
In Jamaica? Or in Trinidad?
Both.
Both. So who will take one? I think my memories of Jamaica as a child, I mean, we went to Trinidad when I was fairly young, when I was probably 7.5 or 8. So a fairly formative part of my life was spent in Trinidad. So we have very fond favorites and food memories of our time there, and we still go back often. But in Jamaica, growing up, I remember a few things. One thing that is always a sort of stand-up memory for me is eating patties, tasty patties, on a Saturday or a day of the week with my grandmother, who I called Manga, who is Martha Briggs' daughter, out of a brown paper bag, because we always eat patties out of the brown paper bag, and drinking a cola champagne. I remember that as one of the things of my childhood that was like something I loved so much, because I love a patty, and I still think it's one of the best things you can have in Jamaica.
Are we talking a regular beef patty?
Yeah, we call them patties. Outside of Jamaica, people call them beef patties, but we just call it a patty. Yeah. And obviously Martha Briggs was famous for her patties, so it seems kind of funny that the memory of her with her daughter is of course that, because I see myself in a brown Renault. I would be in the back seat. It was always piping hot, and it would almost scald your mouth. But I think of that all the time and think of her. I think of eating bun. And getting bun sandwiches at school in my lunch kit, bun and cheese, because we eat bun, which is like, they do it commercially, but you make bun at Easter time, and my grandmother, that same one, made amazingly delicious buns and Christmas puddings. And my other memory of growing up as a child, with all around Manga, which is all Ma Briggs' daughter, was making Christmas puddings one Christmas when I maybe would have been 5 or 6. And she had literally like a wash bucket full of the batter. And they were stirring it. It was an all-day affair.
Call it rub the batter.
And they called it rubbing the batter. Because, there was no hand mixer and there was nothing, machine-like. And it was myself, Manga, and Vi, her housekeeper, who was like her daughter after a time, and another caregiver of ours. And we were there all day. And it was just an all-day hands-on. And I was just thrilled. And I kept licking it and eating the spoon and saying, can I taste it? Can I taste it? So those are the things that I would say as a child of Jamaica. I remember as very formative and such a really heartfelt and just wonderful memories. And they were always around my grandmothers and, aunts with food. And Mish, you talk about Trinidad.
Trinidad, I mean, I have two memories of Jamaica that stand out, and I have Trinidad too, but is that I was a porridge baby. I was obsessed with porridge, and I still kind of am. So every morning I remember, and I don't know how I remember this because I must have been about 3 or 4, but I remember getting up, getting myself dressed for school, all on my own, going outside.
Because she was always on time, and I was always late. Because my sister was always well behaved.
So mom and dad would be sleeping, everybody would be sleeping, and I would go out, and Inez would have made a pot of cornmeal porridge, and I would settle myself, and she put condensed milk, and I would eat my breakfast and sit and patiently wait until
And
Suzanne
cornmeal
rose.
porridge has like nutmeg, cinnamon, and
coconut
condensed milk. Oh my
God.
God.
So good. And they'll make it sometimes with a cinnamon leaf or bay leaf in there. Oh, it's real country style. Love that. And paradise plums. Growing up, we had this sweet called paradise plums, and it is like a sort of a flat, round sweetie that had a very tart center. It was pink on one side and orange on the other.
Orange.
And it had like a strawberry berry with like a tart center with like a orange.
Almost,
so a 3-tone
almost
sweet.
like how like a powdered vitamin C taste on the
inside.
but
with hard crusted sugar on the outside.
Wow.
And I would suck that until the top of my mouth would be cut. So those are my two, among other things, those are the main ones. Trinidad was a whole nother culinary world. I mean,
incredible.
When we got to Trinidad, I think it would be the first part of my life that really opened my palate up, because they have such dynamic food that is uses savory, sweet, starchy spice
Chutneys
all
and
together.
Just pickles and it's just
so
fantastic.
every day on my way home in Trinidad, we would stop and at the corner store, because we talk in Trinidad when we talking like this. You gotta talk about Trinidad, you gotta talk in each Trini accent, right?
I always try to tell people the accents are different.
Yeah,
very different.
So you're gonna talk in each Trini
Island.
accent.
It's different.
Yeah.
So when we would on our way home, we would stop off to get
Salt
like
prune
snacks,
dust?
and I would get salt prune dust, which was basically. Have you ever had a Chinese sweetie?
Or like a
pickled
salted
Chinese
prune.
prune.
Chinese sweetie, or they call them wamoy
or whatever. Anyway, so it's like a salted like prune that is dried up
my God.
and like and has salt and sweet. But we have those in Jamaica.
We eat those a lot in the Caribbean, by the way.
very,
Jamaica,
very-
Trinidad, very obsessed with Chinese sweeties.
Okay.
That's what we call them.
Yes, but in Trinidad they were the big red ones, and they would grind them up and sell the powder that they would wrap up in a little brown paper packet. And I'd be like,
And
like an addict.
pomsites.
And Suzanne would buy pickled pomsite.
Pickled pomsites.
Which is like a
that's
June plum.
in its green state. They peel them and they have them soaking. You sell
In
them soaking
vinegar
in
and
jars
pepper.
of vinegar and pepper.
And you buy
and
it.
you
Wow.
buy it, and like we will
And they-
eat them in Jamaica ripe. So it's very different how we eat. So in Trinidad, everything is pickled. I guess there's a lot of that Indian influence. Pickles, chutneys, jams, layers and layers of fantastic.
So Suzanne would always buy
flavor.
that, and they would wrap it up in brown paper.
In brown paper, and we would eat it on the way home in the car
then-
with mommy.
And my last one, which is two other things, but one is that so mango chow is when you have turned mango, and then you actually pickle it with vinegar and pepper and stuff.
And
so we
salt.
had some mango trees, and in Trinidad we would always eat mango chow. We were obsessed with mango chow till we get sick. So we would peel it and then pickle it and eat like 4 mangoes and say, we want more, let's go get more. So we'd go outside
And
and
so
like
we-
climb the tree
in
and
mango
get more
season.
mangoes in mango season. And then in Trinidad they eat snow cone with condensed milk on top. So I would go and get my snow cone and I would get
You
condensed
get those when
milk.
you go around the
Yeah,
savannah.
Yeah.
So at the savannah, you could go and get the snow cones, and you could get them with condensed milk or without.
Wow.
All of that is very different to how you'd eat in Jamaica, by the way.
Oh, and the tamarind balls.
And the Trinidadian tamarind balls. Oh
I've
my
had
God.
those,
With
yeah.
the salt,
Those are really
pepper,
good.
and
Those
the
are
sugar.
really good.
Yeah.
Whereas in Jamaica, we make them with just sugar. So it's like a one-dimensional flavor versus like a three-dimensional flavor.
Yeah,
in Trinidad.
their food is like all out there. They're like, take me as you see me. There's no holding back.
So what is I've never been to Jamaica. I'm dying to go. What is the dining scene like in Jamaica?
Oh wow, it's become so active now. When we first started our business many moons
25
ago,
years ago.
we were one of like a few restaurants at the time that you really could go to for dining for a night out. But it's really had a huge sort of takeoff. Like everything else, I think foodie culture and food awareness has changed. And so you have a host of really wonderful ethnic restaurants, wonderful Japanese, Indian, Chinese, Arabic cuisine. I think we've just recently even have a Vietnamese place that's opened up, if you can believe that. And then a lot of, kind of bistro,
Wine bars.
cafes, coffee shops, wine bars. For the most part, I think Jamaica, we always say the best food in the Caribbean, I think, is consumed in a home or on the street. That's where you have the most authentic, the best meals. But I think you have some really good offerings out there. I think you have a challenge. I think sometimes with consistency of service and consistency of experience, and we know that for ourselves because obviously we've been running restaurants and we're back in it again. But I think it's really taken off, and I think there is a lot of options out there now, and a lot of awareness about wine and fine dining and dining and drinking and experiencing good experiences for both.
Is there a particular part of the island that you go to when you're going out to eat?
No, I think each kind of town or parish has their little thing or spot. And, if you go to certain parts of the island, you're going more for a rustic experience. There's a really great fish place that is down in Alligator Pond, where he gets fresh catch, but it's really more beachside. So there are individual spots that you can go around. I think to me the most exciting thing that I see happening from a more finer dining perspective in Jamaica is a resurgence of artisans doing gourmet type high level products. So there's one purveyor that we work with who has started to do local charcuterie, and it's capiciola and really good quality salami and that type of stuff. There's a lady doing local goat's cheese. We have a friend who has just launched an incredible bean to bar chocolate. that
Wow.
is like global scale good. Like
Yeah,
could be in a
beautiful
beautiful, the packaging, the branding, everything. You know, you have local art ice cream makers. You know, so I think that, and a lot of organic farmers doing little things. I think that's very exciting to me because that was not happening 5, 10, 15 years ago.
And
at
I think
all.
you have some really nice local franchises that
Yes.
have started, or local products that are essentially our own, whether it's, you know, Cafe Blue coffee shops that are the Sharps, or even Chilitos in Kingston owned by a friend of ours, Chris. It's a local sort of Jamexican sort of franchise that's sort of incorporating ingredients with that sort of Mexican sort of taqueria sort of. So there are some really indigenous or mestiz in you know, Ocho Rios doing really uniquely their own Jamaican sort of things, but at a very high level. So I mean, that I think is very exciting.
I really want to go.
Yeah, you gotta come.
I have to come. I just like the complete diversity of the types of different foods that you have on the island. Like it sounds like it's become like a melting pot
For sure.
of all these different.
And Jamaica is very urban. People don't realize that. You know, a lot of islands are not, but Jamaica and Kingston, it's very much an urban scene. So there is a lot of things to do. You know, and there are a lot of things to do. So it's good to come.
So now I get to ask you a couple of questions that I ask every guest that comes here. So let's start with one of your bad food experiences. You can name the restaurant if you want to, but you don't have to. What's one of the worst like restaurant
Does
experiences?
it have to be a restaurant experience, or
No.
just any
It could
kind
be
of
a food experience.
Food experience.
Okay, I know we're thinking probably of the same
We're probably thinking
one.
of the same thing. I should let Suzanne tell it, however.
Okay, which one?
I don't know which one you're thinking of. I am. I mean, a bad food experience for me would be. Let me think about it. Suzanne, you go first. I have to think about it.
Well, there are two bad, I mean, restaurant experiences, anything with, I mean, it's not food, but when they have bad service or nonchalant bad service, it really infuriates me. I'm a stickler for that. So I would say anytime I don't care how fancy or great the restaurant is, if the service is not up to scratch, then that's a problem. But certainly for me, one of my most unmemorable food experiences was, there are two things I think of. One was when I had to have iguana soup in Curacao.
Oh, we have a different thing.
So disgusting.
It was disgusting.
It was so upsetting to me in every way. The soup was like green.
Oh.
I did not. It was just not. It was terrible. And the other one, which was in Asia.
Yes, well, that would be mine then.
Was it the one that I think Michelle is thinking of?
Yes.
That really.
Is that we had to when we tasted
ate what's called
durian
durian
for the first time.
that fruit.
Oh, and some people love it. But
I know
man,
it's either revered or hated, but let me tell you something.
it was pretty much hated on our part.
Whoa.
We were like,
there are not many things
Yes.
that I can tell you compared to that first bite. I won't tell you what I said.
yes, no,
Said
it was, but it
tasted
just
like.
tastes frowsy. That's all.
It's the frowsiest thing. And the thing was, we were there not understanding what it was. And it was this massive
saying,
spiky
"What is
fruit.
it? What
and they
is
kept
it?
telling us to be careful of the durian. And then
Yeah,
when
'cause
it was...
smells,
Yes.
right?
yeah, they say they tie it on the back of the car and pull it home. Because that's how badly the car smells. So imagine
I don't want to eat anything that, I
that
have to
smell
put
when you
outside.
taste it.
Girl,
Let's just put it that way.
it was rough.
And then it was...
And anytime I buck up liver, I feel pretty traumatized. I have to say, because I don't.
Yeah,
I have
Michelle
a
has
liver
a
texture issue.
organ.
So yeah, any
Oh.
organ. So if anytime I buck up an organ in my eating, I'm like, wheel and come again. Something isn't right
I mean,
here.
I can't think of a restaurant
Yes,
experience,
no.
but those two are sort of like experiences of
dishes,
eating
yeah.
things that were really
Not good.
traumatic, I should say.
Traumatic.
Yes.
Okay, so my last question for you. If you could have your last meal in a restaurant, where would it be and who is invited?
That's a really good one. I'll start. If it has to, I mean, it could be a restaurant. It could also be like my ideal space would be some sort of villa in the south of France, or in a sort of a little village in the south of France where they have outdoor al fresco long tables. And I would love to be there with, some of the ancestors. So I would love to sit with someone like a Martha Briggs to hear the story of her life and see how she lived. And I would love to have, obviously, close family, intimate family like Suzanne and my parents and so on. But some of the great Caribbean intellectuals, a Derek Walcott, a V.S. Naipaul, maybe a Gabriel Garcia Marquez, or an artist, or people like that, just to see how the impact that our culture and the heritage had on them and their art and their work. And also, I always want to ask people what their favorite food is. You know what I mean? I'm like, what's your favorite? I remember reading somewhere that like some president ate, jelly beans or M&Ms or Skittles on his desk. I'm like, really? They eat Skittles? Like, it's just so humanizing to think that other people eat the same things you do. And I think that's what that would be for me, I think. A big opulent spread.
What would your meal be?
It would be a sort of a long, opulent Provençal style spread with a table filled with, just dishes and fresh ingredients and fresh vegetables and wine and, like just something that we could leisurely sit under an arbor for the whole day, eating and talking and that would be, to me, that would be my last supper.
And you, Suzanne?
I don't even have an answer. I would say I would want to be either somewhere in France or somewhere in Italy, because I think you have fantastic food experiences in both of those countries. Maybe a fantastic restaurant in the city. I can't think of a specific one or place. I would want to have amazing wine, copious amounts of champagne, great cheese, and as well. And I think I would like all of my family, close family and friends, but also all the people who have passed and left, that you can't really get a chance to, both friends and relatives who maybe you never took enough time to listen to or understand or talk to or learn about. And I think it would be really interesting, on the same sort of bend that Michelle, I think it would be really interesting to have like the founding fathers of our nation sort of there. Norman Manley, Edna Manley, the Manley family, and sort of Bustamante, all of these, figures of our sort of creation of the sort of national identity. I would love to hear their take on what it was like to grow up and work towards bringing, an awareness of self and, what it was like to sort of lead that charge. I think it must have been they're obviously great people, but it would be interesting to talk to them. I mean, I think that sort of era of Jamaica really fascinates me. And I'm sure there's so much more that I could say that would sound more worthwhile. But I would know that I would want some great, like, fantastic brick oven pizza done as the Italians do it, as the best way possible. I would want, great salads and pizza, some just wonderful sort of grilled meats, very simple, clean. I mean, for me, it's much more to have a big diverse table with much more rustic food than it is to have really refined, overly done things. And that's luxury for me, with just fantastic wine, great company and conversation, great music in a city somewhere sort of that I love, or a country that I think is synonymous with great food experiences.
Wow. Those sound like two great parties. It sounds like a lot of fun.
It seems to narrow it down to like one place with one thing.
You don't hard. No. I always tell people, you can invite people you've never met. You can invite celebrities, people who have passed.
And I probably would want like have JFK there and like Martin Luther King as well, with Norman and sort of all of these like big thinkers of that sort of time, for sure. I would want all of them there. Nelson Mandela, so kind of knock on everybody's brain a bit.
Yeah. But then it's like, then you die after you get all this great information, and then you're gone. Yeah. But still, it'd be a great conversation.
Yeah, it would be. But I think it would be to have the people that are there. I think it would be the people that have been meant much to you in the life now, and the people that were part of your life that you didn't take the time to know enough to be there as well. So I would say that would be it.
Excellent. Well, I mean, I could talk to you both for like 2 hours more. There's so much in this book, and congratulations to you both. This is a fantastic, exceptional book. And
thank you so much.
I'm really, really happy for you both, and I love it.
Well, we're honored to be here, and thank you for having us on your show. It's been a great time New York has been very good to us, and we're very, very, very thrilled to be here with you and to do all of the things that we're doing. It's been really a
Where can listeners follow your work?
So we have a restaurant in Jamaica called Summer House. So our Instagram handle is Summer House JA. our website, summerhouseja.com. For our personal brand, we have twosistersandameal.com. And we're around, we're here, we're doing things in the city.
We'll be doing a few more things. We'll be at the Standard, East Village at Equity at the Table event with Julia Tertian and Clancy Cooks and Clancy Miller of Clancy Cooks and a whole lot of other wonderful female authors on Tuesday the 11th. I think it is open to the public, but I think you just need to make reservations.
We're coming back in February to do a program at MoFad, Museum of Food and Drink in Williamsburg on February
21st. And Julia Tertian is going to moderate that talk with us. And on February the 20th, we'll be at the 92nd Street Y, also doing another talk. We're not quite sure who's moderating that one for us yet.
Excellent.
So we'll be back.
We'll be around.
We will.
And people can come to Jamaica.
Yeah. And if they come to Jamaica, come to Summer House and check it out. We have items from both of the books on the menu, and we have a great bar. We do breakfast, lunch, and dinner. We do Veuve Clicquot Champagne Gardens every couple of months, and so we have
an unplugged live music series with young musicians who are doing their own kind of music in Jamaica. So it's good.
And
a lot of good
Island
stuff.
Potluck people can watch on YouTube.
Yes,
and
Island Potluck.
I can't recommend it highly enough. It's so much fun.
Yeah, and that was actually great fun too. We did it a little while ago now, but it does show you sort of our perspective and our view of the best places to explore, the different sort of scapes of Jamaica, the different places to experience, different kinds of experiences you can have, both culinary and otherwise.
For sure.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Oh,
it's been great to be here.
And thank you for listening. We'll catch you next week on The Hungry Society.
Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network, food radio supported by you. For our freshest content and to hear about exclusive events, subscribe to our newsletter. Enter your email at the bottom of our website, heritageradionetwork.org. Connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at heritage_radio. Heritage Radio Network is a nonprofit organization driving conversations to make the world a better, fairer, more delicious place. And we couldn't do it without support from listeners like you. Want to be a part of the food world's most innovative community? Rate the shows you like, tell your friends, and please join our community by becoming a member. Just click on the beating heart at the top right of our homepage. Thanks for listening.